Hey everybody, and welcome back to Ready Steady Play. Thanks for joining me again. We are getting ready to play Escape Plan. Escape Plan is the new Vital Lacerda game. If you don't know him, he's known for designing some pretty heavy Euro ventures with Vinos, and he did Kanban, and then he did the Gallerist and Lisboa. I'm sure there's one I'm forgetting. His latest Kickstarter on Mars is just funded, so congratulations for that. But we're going to be learning Escape Plan, which is his penultimate release, if you count on Mars. And in this one, it's actually supposed to be the lightest of the bunch. It's produced by Eagle-gryphon Games. It's for 1 to 5 players, and at 20 minutes, an alleged 20 minutes per player, it's also very much the shortest of his games. So, with that in mind, it's a good introduction to Vital Lacerda for me and my friends on the channel. So I'm going to teach you how to play, and then tomorrow we're going to play it. I'm going to start off with what I normally do, a rundown of all the components in the box. Now this is the deluxe Kickstarter version here, so some of the components have been replaced with the deluxe components that came with the stretch goals and things with the campaign. I'm pretty certain that the upgrade pack will be available from Eagle-gryphon Games, the publisher, because they usually make all of that stuff available later. They don't usually do Kickstarter exclusives. So do keep an eye out for that if you like what you see, but when a component has been upgraded, I'll just quickly mention it during this first component breakdown part of this video. If you just want to learn how to start playing and get stuck right in, then skip ahead to the setup. As usual, all of my timecodes are in the description below, so you can just jump straight to the part that you need to find. I hope you're ready to come on this journey with us and learn how to formulate a master escape plan. So first we're going to take a look at what's inside the box. Alright, so we've got a rulebook, we've got 5 player boards here, and these are in player colors, so you can see there's 5 player colors. There's a distinct character on each board as well. Now I've hidden in here, I don't know if this is the intentional, but in here I've hidden away these money bags here, and players are going to use these to hide money over the course of the game. Then here we've got the game board. The game board is double-sided with a 1 to 3 player side and a 4 and 5 player side. Here we've got a contact card board. Now this is actually a Kickstarter deluxe edition thing, so this is going to hold your contacts during the course of the game. We've got 14 city tiles here. We've got 2 starter tiles and 12 tiles lettered A, B, C, and D as well here. Now here we've got all the tokens that you're going to use in any given game. So this is a time marker to track the time of day. These are called extra turn markers. We've got a bunch of cans of gasoline here, as well as a whole bag of gangers, gang members. We've got a bag of police officers, and you should have in here 3 different kinds of police officers. There we've got some SWATs, and I believe that these are federal officers. There's some blue county officers as well in there somewhere. Where are they? Oh my god, where are they? We've lost them. There they are, the blue cops. This was organized like an Orleans bag. We've got a bunch of cards here. We've got we've got some exit cards, handcuff cards. These are just handcuffs on both sides. We've got some patrol cards here with numbers on the back and images as well. Here we've got escape plans. These are secret escape plans for each player. And we've got a deck of contact cards here. And these cards that I've just shown you will be used in every single game that you play. Then we've got some mission cards here, which are sort of like a mini modular expansion that came with the Kickstarter Deluxe set. And each of these missions has like a secret mission that you can do to unlock player powers. Those are optional. And we've also got here some optional player powers as well. These ones here that you can give out. It's not recommended you use these with the mission, picking one module or the other to add to the game. And it's not recommended you do it until you've played the game a few times. We've also got here the cards for the single player version of the game and cards for the 2-player version of the game. There are some meeples that go with these 2 decks. And so this is Sandra and the other one's a cop man. And here they are, the meeples that go with these 2 decks. So you'll need to implement these in the 1 and 2 player games if you want to play at those player counts. Here we've got locker tiles. So we've got locker tiles in 3 colors, brown, green, and black. And you'll need the locker tiles for every game. We've got 2 stacks of exit tiles in black and grey. We've got a stack of fixer tiles here as well. You'll need the fixer tiles in every game as well. I think this one is maybe a Kickstarter tile. I think there's some Kickstarters in here as well. We've got these gas mask tiles. They're going to help you avoid the cops. We got SWAT helmets for avoiding the cops too. We got bulletproof jackets for avoiding the cops. And we got cop hats for avoiding the cops. So all of these things are going to help you avoid the cops, which is good. We got 9 building tiles. We got 3 blue buildings, 3 purple buildings, and 3 safe houses as well. We got a whole crap ton of money. And if you're going to get out the city, you're going to need to have a lot of money to pay people, like your contacts and stuff. We got 9 keys. Now, the keys I've got here are metal, because these are a Kickstarter deluxe keys set, but they are also in cardboard in the retail, or without the Kickstarter edition, and they come in 3 colors that match these lockers. It's not a coincidence. We got a bunch of handy dandy player aids. On one side we've got the sort of actions and phases, and we've got some handy dandy stuff here, and on the back we've got all the buildings available in the game, so don't worry, we'll look at this in more detail later on. We got a score pad. Cool. And I've put together these handy player bags. So we got 5 of them. We got a purple player, we got a pink player, an orange player, a green player, and a yellow player. I'll show you what's in one bag. So here in the green player bag, what we got is 4 red stars used to track notoriety. And one thing to note about this is that these are from the Kickstarter upgrade kit. You will have black cubes in the retail set. We got some wound cubes here. 3 of those per player. They'll need 3 of those. Here I've got a little red cube and a little tick mark. Those are used for the mission modular expansion, that deck of cards I showed you earlier, so more about that later. We've got a little meeple. We should have 9 acrylic cubes, and the acrylic cubes are from the upgrade pack. In the retail set you would have wooden cubes like this. We should have 2 markers like this, one for tracking notoriety and turn order. We've got a little rest token here, more about that later. We've got a couple of gang hideout tokens, more about those later as well, 2 of those. And then we should have 1 band-aid. And we should have 7 of these asset tiles as well, with 10s on the back and different symbols on the front. So each player will need a set of things like this, in addition to their player board and their bag of money like that. Well, it looks like we've successfully taken everything out of the box and had a look at what's inside. So now I'm going to set the game up. So as you can see here, I've got the board laid out for setting up a 1 to 3 player game. I've got my 3 player boards, yellow, pink, and green. I've got the board here, and that's on its 1 to 3 player side, which you can tell because it's got 1 to 3 player symbol here. And then I've got all the tiles and various other bits and pieces I need. Now, because I'm quite tight on space here, and we're not actually going to be playing the game today, we're just going through the rules, I'm only going to set up 1 player board for the green player, and I'll use their components when it's necessary for a demonstration. So what we've got on the board here are a number of placements that are just going to be set up pretty much the same way every time. So I'll walk you through those first, and then we'll talk about how to set up the city. Here we've got locations for the various businesses and safe houses available in the game. So what you can do is just take your safe house tiles here and make sure they match up with the number above and just put them out like this. You can do the same with the businesses, making sure you match the symbols so that they're in the appropriate spot. Note that you've got the symbol for business and safe house here and here. During this step you can also randomly place the 9 keys onto the key rings here in each of the safe houses. You can put out the equipment items here. The gas mask goes into the turquoise space, and the 3 brown spaces can hold the other 3 items in any order. We've also got spaces up here for the lockers, so give those tiles a shuffle and then put them into their appropriate position. The ganger meeples all live in here. And put the gasoline in here. A little time tracker goes up here. Each player puts one of their markers here along the bottom of the notoriety track. And then we've got player order along the top here. Now, the rules state that the first player is the last one to rob a bank, but if none of you have robbed a bank, then simply randomize the player order in your preferred method. We can put the fixer tiles here onto the space in the safe house. We're giving our contact cards a good shuffle, so you put them into this slot here and flip up cards until there are 7 face-up cards. Note that if you don't have the board from the Kickstarter campaign, don't worry about it. You can create this row without the board. Over here we've got all the pieces that are going to come out during the course of the game but are not yet on the board. These are just reference cards. These exit decks will come out later, as will the handcuff cards be used during the course of the game. And these extra action tokens here will be acquired during the game. And then we've got a big ass deck, stack of money, and a bag of police. Now we've got all that done, we can set up the city. So what we do is we take these 2 starting tiles here, and we place them on the board in a random order. And you can put these starting tiles so both arrows face down, or both arrows face up. These are the only two legal orientations. And once you've done that, flip them, making sure to preserve the orientation, i.e. flipping both tiles in the same direction. So we've got one tile here with a hospital on it. This is the hospital tile and it's special. This here is a sort of regular city tile with a convenience store and a gang on it. So you can take 2 gangers straight away from the pool you created earlier and put them on this space. The next thing we'll do is flip over the top tile of each of these decks so that it's face up. Then put 2 cops on each tile. Take these out of the cop bag. Then, if any tiles have 2 of the same color cop, return 1 of each to the bag without replacing them. And now we're going to do the same for this tile here, but not the hospital tile. Note the hospital tile will never ever have police on it. Next up, we're going to take these patrol cards here, and there are 6 of these. We're going to give them a shuffle and remove one randomly from the game. So put that back in the game box. Don't look at it. Make sure you don't see it. The rest can be placed here on top of the walkie-talkie. Look at that. Then deal each player 1 escape plan card. My 2 missing players would get theirs as well. These are unique and each one has hidden information that the player will keep secret. And now we'll set up our player board. So here we've got our player board. We've got our secret escape plan card that we're going to keep hidden. So you should have 3 wound cubes like this, which you're going to put here into your green wound space. You've got 2 ganger markers, which go down here on your ganger place. You've got a sunshine rest token. It's got a moon on the back, but put its sunshine up here in this slot. We've got a band-aid. Put it band-aid side up, not the white side, but the band-aid side up down here, on this position here. You've got 4 notoriety markers. Now in the retail version, these are just black cubes, and they go into this position here. You've got 9 income cubes. In the retail version, these are wood, and they just go into these slots here on the side of the board. We've got 7 asset tiles. Now, it's important to get this right. Make sure you take one with the extra action token and put it into the slot with the matching picture here. Then make sure you take the 3 with the shields and the move symbol like that and put them into these 3 slots here. The order doesn't matter. Down here you put the remaining 3 tiles. Once again, the order doesn't matter. Finally, you've got 9 income up here. Take $9,000 and keep this hidden behind your secret money screen. Your money and your escape plan card are secret throughout the entire course of the game, so don't let anyone see them. The very last thing that happens is each player takes their meeple and puts them here into the hospital. So with that, we're all done set up, and I will talk you through how to play Escape Plan. So in Escape Plan, we're all thieves, and we've just committed a successful heist. We've taken the money from the heist and scattered it around the city, hiding it in businesses and in safe houses, as well as with contacts and in secret lockers and stashes on the freeway. But unfortunately, someone's ratted us out, and now we've got to get out of the city as quickly as possible. It's every person for themselves as we try to collect as much of the money that we've hidden around the city before we get caught. And it's every person for themselves as we hightail it around the city, trying to collect as much of our money as we can and avoid the cops before we get caught. The only way to win Escape Plan is to escape the city with the most money. But there are two ways to lose. You can either escape with less money than the winner, or get caught and eliminated from the game. The game takes place over 3 rounds, known as days. These 3 days represent the last 3 days of struggle as we try to flee the city before all the exits are locked down by the police and escape is hopeless. Each day consists of 6 phases. However, the vast majority of the game takes place in Phase 5, which is like the action phase. The other 5 phases are mostly just sort of admin and setup for Phase 5. Here you can see the 6 phases indicated on the player aid. The first phase is get income. The second phase is reveal patrol cars. The third phase, in turn order, place city tiles. The fourth phase, adjust turn order by notoriety. The fifth phase is in turn order, players take actions. And the sixth phase is prepare new day. So the way it's going to work is that we're going to miss the get income phase on the first turn because we've actually already taken our income, which is represented by the $9,000 you start with. There's a second part to this phase, but we don't do it on the first round. So we'll look at that a bit later. The second phase is reveal patrol cards. What we're going to do is we're going to reveal 2 of these cards here and find out which exits in the city are blocked. The third phase, which is reveal the city tiles, is going to involve us expanding the city. This is going to reveal new locations, including the exits to the city, these business tiles here, these safe houses here, as well as convenience stores, helipads, clinics and churches, all of which offer benefits to us. By the end of the game, all of the tiles will be on the board, which means that you will have the opportunity to visit every single location in the game. However, based on the order they come out, you may not do so in time before you need to escape. The fourth phase of a round is the adjust turn order, which is where we change this turn order. So you'll note that the turn order only changes 3 times over the course of the game because there are only 3 days. Then we take all of our actions in the 5th phase. The 6th phase is very simple admin, and we're back to the top. I mentioned that you win the game by having the most money at the end of the game, and that's true. Money is calculated in thousands in this. So we start with $9,000, which looks like this. But there's 2 kinds of money in the game, really. There is this cash on hand that we've got hidden in our player bag here, and this is money that we can use to help us over the course of the game. We can use it to pay contacts, we can use it to buy equipment, we can use it to flee the city. There's also this more sort of amorphous cash, which is like which is the money that we've stolen, the money that we've stashed, that we've picked back up. It's not cash on hand, but it's somehow accessible to us. And what this manifests as is endgame scoring money. The only way to get this cash on hand is to take something called income. The income symbol looks like this little green square here, and you'll see it popping up all over the place. Whenever you take income, you're going to take a monetary amount, which is depicted here, which is going to go down as these cubes come off your board. More about why they do that later. The only way to get cash in hand is to take this income amount. You'll note here, though, that we've got a bunch of other monetary values, and they look like this blue banknote with a white holder and a monetary amount in the middle. This blue banknote indicates that this is endgame scoring. This is not going to give us money that will help us out over the course of the game, but it will give us a nice bonus at the end of the game, and that's really important. You're going to see this symbol come up all over the place. So note that wherever you see this symbol, that is money that you're going to get at the end of the game to help you towards endgame scoring. What you're also going to see on the board is the blue banknote with the red holder. Wherever you see the blue banknote with the red holder, this is going to be a penalty that you will suffer during endgame scoring. The 2 primary penalties for endgame scoring are here for taking wounds, and here for your position on the notoriety track. If you ever see the green banknote, this means that this is an immediate cost that must be paid straight away from the cash in your hand. So you're going to be paying these costs with these banknotes. And this cost will come up here on the equipment, it comes up here on the contact cards, and it comes up here on the fixer cards, as well as in some other locations. During the end of the game, you're going to be scored based on money you've got from your safe houses, which refers to these values here. You're going to get money from the buildings, which are also these values here. You're going to get money for any cash you have left over on your person. You're going to get money for your asset tiles. That means any you've flipped over to show this symbol here on their back. You're going to get money for your contact cards. As you can see here, we've got endgame scoring along the side of these tracks here. You'll also get money for any bags you've unlocked. This refers to money from these locker tiles, as well as money in these exit tiles. Then you will lose money for your notoriety level and your wounds. So during endgame scoring, if this is your player board, this is looking pretty good because you're going to get $100,000 for 5 uninterrupted contact cards. Unfortunately, if during the course of the game you take handcuffs, they'll go down here and block that space. Furthermore, that contact card is lost to you. You cannot use it over the course of the game. So that's going to have immediate bad repercussions for you. During the final scoring of the game, you must discard 1 contact for each handcuff card on your player board. Now, in this case, it's not so bad because we can get rid of the 2 under our handcuffs, which we can't score anyway because those positions are blocked. So we're still going to get our 30,000. But where it becomes bad is if we took these handcuffs before those contact cards were played, then we would have to give up these 2 contact cards, meaning that we're not going to get any endgame scoring points at all. So bear in mind that you will have to discard contacts from your player board equal to the number of handcuff cards there. You can discard the cards under the handcuffs that have been blocked out over the course of the game, but if you don't have any there to discard, you must discard open cards instead, which is very bad. I'll explain later how we take handcuff cards, so now that you understand how the endgame scoring works, let's start going through a day and working out how the game is played. So let's start now by looking at Phase 2, the patrol cars. In the patrol phase, you're going to take 2 of these cards and put them into one of these 3 spaces here on the board. Now, if you'll remember, there were 6 cards, but we removed 1. That means that you're going to wind up with 2 spaces containing 2 cards and 1 space containing just 1 card. The space containing only 1 card is the legitimate exit to the city, and they're linked to these exit spaces on the tiles. Here is exit 1, and here's exit 3, for example. So what we're going to do now is reveal 2 of these cards and place them on the board. So we've got exit number 1. And this card goes down here. And exit number 2, which goes up here. This means that at the moment, it looks like exit 3 is our most likely candidate for the true exit, but of course we have no way of knowing. And that's the patrol car step complete. So now we're into Phase 3, city tiles. And the way this works is that the first player is going to pick one of these 4 tiles and place it on the board. Now, there are 2 things to note when placing a tile. The first thing that you have to think about is that when you put down a tile, it must be touching 2 other tiles. That means that the first tile placed in the game can only go in one of these 2 spots. The second thing is that the tiles are actually divided into 4 regions. The regions we can see here are commercial, industrial, residential, and water. Now, these regions are distinct from the locations, which are represented by these hexagons and these circles. When you're putting down a tile, you must make sure that if you track along the board edges, at least one of the regions on one of the board edges matches up to another region on one of the other 2 board edges. This is a legal placement because we're touching 2 tiles and the water is connected to the water. When regions of a same color link up, they become a single region. More about this when we get to movement. When you put down a tile with a hexagon on it, you're going to have to place a business or a safe house. In this case, we're placing a business because it's the white hexagon. The red hexagon is a safe house. Pro tip, remember these escape plan cards? Well, they've got all of these secret pieces of information relating to the businesses and the safe houses. At the start of the game, you probably want to pick one of the businesses with one of the green income icons and not one of these money icons. But as you get to know the game better, you can adjust this strategy and try new things. So in this case, our green player who's placing this tile is going to go ahead and grab the restaurant. So the green player takes the restaurant tile from here and puts it on the board. Now that the green player's put out a tile, the yellow player and pink player will do one, and then the green player will get to place a 4th tile. So now that we've placed out all of our tiles, what we're going to do is flip over the tops of the next set of tiles. And what we're going to do is go into the bag here and put out some new police. Now, as we go through the tiles here, we might draw 2 of the same color, like this. If this happens, once you've put out all 8 police officers, remove 1 from each of the tiles that have got 2 of the same color and return them to the bag. Do not replace them. So you can see we might wind up with some tiles that have fewer police coming onto the board. Now we're done that, we're ready to move on to the Adjust Turn Order section here. And so what happens with Adjust Turn Order is that we alter the turn order to the Notoriety, which is this section here. If Notoriety looked like this, for example, we would change it so yellow would be in first, pink in second, and green in third. If players are tied for Notoriety, you make sure you reverse their order on the track. Because this is the first turn, what that means is that pink will go into first and green will go into last place. Now we're ready for the action phase. So this action phase, part 5, is the meat and potatoes of the game. This is where pretty much all the gameplay is going to take place. So this time tracker is going to move from the morning through the afternoon to the evening, and then you might even have a bonus night and dawn step, which are optional, and we'll discuss how those are accessed later. But on these open spaces here, every player is going to get to take 1 action in turn order. After each player has had a turn taking an action, it will move on to the star step. This is where Notoriety is adjusted. During the action phase, you track Notoriety on your player board. And then later in the Notoriety phase, it's used to change the Notoriety meter on the main game board. When you gain Notoriety, move the stars into the space with the red arrow on your player board. And when you lose Notoriety, move the stars to the space with the blue arrow on your player board. So during the first turn, you might gain Notoriety or lose Notoriety points. And then we will adjust your position on this track according to those points that you picked up here. And then we'll move into here. Everyone will take another action, potentially gaining or losing Notoriety points. And then we'll adjust again according to those points. And so on and so forth. And of course, Notoriety will be continued to be adjusted during these optional phases if they take place. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what happens to green now that green's got an action to take. But when it's your turn to take an action, you basically take this action in 3 distinct steps. The first step you're going to do is called travel. The second part is called alert, where we react to your travel with the police. And the final step is called visit, where you will visit a location. So let's take a look at the board and talk a bit about travel, avoid, and visit. As we previously discussed, each tile is divided into 4 distinct regions. You can see here now that we've got all our city tiles, those regions are more apparent. Players' pieces will travel across regions to visit the different locations. During your travel step, you have 3 movement points. Every player has 3, but there are ways to gain more movement points, which will come up as we continue this demonstration. But there are several important things to note when moving around. The first is that you must always end your turn at a location. You cannot ever remain stood in a region on a tile. This is because you're hiding from the police, and so you need to run between different locations. The second thing to consider is how movement points are spent. Leaving a location, such as the hospital where we start, costs 1 movement point. It is free to move within a region. That is, no matter the size of the region. Water is impassable. You cannot walk over water. So you can see we actually have a rather large residential location here, which is adjacent to 4 locations: the hospital, the heliport, the safe house, and the convenience store, which means for 2 movement, a player can move from one of these locations to any other one. 1 to leave the hospital, and then 1 more to enter the safe house, the heliport, or the convenience store. So if we visit the convenience store and we want to get to exit 3, we will have to spend 1 to exit the convenience store, 1 to move into the industrial region, and our 3rd point to move on to the exit here. Now this would all be very simple if it weren't for the police. But before I get to talking about the police who are going to be affecting us in the avoid step, let's talk very quickly about helipads, and we'll talk very quickly about helipads, heliports, and ferries. I would also like to talk about the subway. Let's talk about heliports. This is what's called a helicopter action here. And there are several things that allow you to take the helicopter action in the game, but primarily it's the heliport location here, the gangers here, and helicopter contacts like this one. When you visit a heliport, you can take the helicopter action. The helicopter action allows you to move to an adjacent tile or a tile 2 spaces away. What's powerful about this is not necessarily that you can skip over tiles, although that is very powerful. It's also that you can land anywhere on that tile, including locations. So, for example, to move from this heliport here to this biker gang hideout over here would actually cost us 1 movement to go into the residential zone, 1 more movement to go into this industrial zone, that's 2, and a 3rd movement to go into this commercial zone. But we only have 3 movement, so we cannot reach the hideout. Because we can't end our turn here, we actually have to stop in the convenience store and complete our movement next turn. However, because we started in the heliport, we can actually use the heliport action right away. This is a unique element of the heliport and also of the subway. These 2 locations count as travel locations, which can be used in the travel step. Every other location can only be activated in the visit step, part 3 of your action phase. If we activate the helicopter space here, we can move to any adjacent tile or a tile 2 away. So we could actually move straight to the biker gang hideout, because we can pick any land spot on this tile to land in. What that means is that we cannot land in the water. It should be noted that if we hire these bikers, we can take biker actions, which includes that helicopter action over here. If we have a helicopter card, we can also do that action, but you'll notice that the iconography on this card and on this one have a red helicopter symbol. The reason for this is that you must depart a tile with these helicopter symbols. There's also this rather special medevac card, and it should be noted that the medevac doesn't have to leave from a tile with the hospital symbol. You know, it's an emergency helicopter, it can go from wherever it wants. But it always takes you to the hospital. So, that's the helicopters. Let's talk about the ferry symbol. If any of the spaces within the water zone contain this ferry symbol, then the entire water area has a ferry service, which means that it can be entered and used just like any other region on the board. That is to say, our yellow player here could go 1 into the water here, and then 1 more straight into the restaurant. So the last thing to explain are the subways. So put out some extra subway spaces here and here. Sorry about the glare on the board. If we take our green player here and put them in this industrial district over here, they could enter the subway for 1, and then they can actually go all the way over here to the other subway station. They could go to any subway station on the board in this way. And in addition to getting this vast amount of free movement, they also get 1 extra movement point for using the subway, giving them 4 possible movement points they can use this turn. So that's 1 into the subway, 1 more here to come out, 3, 4 into this exit here, for example. And so that's how you do the travel step. Fairly straightforward, you think, fairly easy. You've got all these cool ways of moving around, like the helicopter actions. And if you're wondering how you get these contact cards in the bikers, don't worry, we'll talk about that later. But you think the ferries are cool too, but here's the thing. Step 2 is the alert step. And that's where things get complicated. You see, whenever you leave a tile with police on it, you must avoid the cops. The cops are not associated with a particular region or with a particular location. The cops occupy entire tiles. And what this means is that when one of our meeples leaves a tile with cops on it, we are going to have to avoid those cops. But unless we have a means to do so, we're going to take damage. For every cop on a tile that you move through, you're going to take 1 wound. So we've got our lovely player board here, and this is the section you're looking at when it comes to wounds. Now, whenever you take wounds from a comp, you move 1 of your wound cubes from the green space into the red space. And this is bad news for you for several reasons. If you get all 3 cubes into the red space and you take another wound, then you're going to be arrested and take a handcuff card instead. It's one of these guys. When you take a handcuff card, it goes into one of these spots here on your player board, and you'll start filling up these spots with handcuffs from the rightmost. then when you do take the card, you get 1 wound back. But really, you don't want these handcuff cards because they're really going to penalize you at the end of the game. And I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. So if we want to avoid taking wounds, we're going to have to avoid taking damage from the police. Now, if we have a look at our situation here, yellow wants to get into the restaurant. So they come 1 here. They're going to go into here. That's a free move. Then they're going to go across the water onto this tile here and into the restaurant. So that's 1, 2, 3. Perfect. They've only left this tile, which means they're going to take 2 wounds unless they've got some way of avoiding the SWAT and the federal cop. So how do we avoid cops, you ask? Well, what we're looking at now are the 3 main actions you'll do on your turn. That is travel, and then avoid, and then visit, where we're going to visit the locations we wind up at. But there's a whole subset of actions called executive actions. And executive actions are things that you can do during travel, avoid, and visit that will supplement your turn. And those involve things like calling on our contacts, using equipment cards that we buy, and even using fixer tokens that we've got here as well as these asset tiles on our board. There are many things that you can deploy to help you avoid the cops, move around more efficiently, and avoid taking wounds. But before we look at executive actions, you now understand the principle of avoid. There's just a few little nuances I will mention. You don't have to worry about entering a tile with cops. You only have to worry about leaving a tile with cops. In the 3rd day, you're going to wind up in one of these exit spaces. When you exit the board, you are technically leaving a tile, which means that you will have to avoid the cops on the tile with the exit location. Make sure you have the wounds or the equipment to escape from that tile. So the final action is visit, and this is where we actually visit the locations that we wind up at. So there are essentially 2 kinds of locations in this game. Hexagonal game critical locations, which are really important to visit if you want to win, and these circular locations, which offer nice boons and sort of bonus things that you can do, which are great to stop by if you want benefits from. So here you can see a list of all the locations in the game. We've got the important locations on this side, business buildings, safe houses, gang, hideouts, and exits. And then these are the slightly more bonus style locations. Hospital, which is on the starting tile. And then you've got a church, store, and clinic, which sort of offer you different bonuses. And at the bottom here, we've got the subway and the heliport, which actually are only used during the travel part of your turn and not used during the visit part of your turn. So you don't really need to worry about them at this stage. Now you should note that no matter what location you're going to, there is one truth about these locations. If another player is there already when you come and visit, then you will take 1 notoriety. If there are 2 players there when you come to visit, you'll take 2 notoriety. So I'm going to explain all of notoriety at the end of this visit section here and how notoriety works. So what we're going to do now is go through the locations, and we're going to go through them in order, and we're going to start with the safe houses. So when you visit a safe house, the first thing you can do is reference your escape plan. So here our green player has gone into safe house number 1. So they check their escape plan, and we can see that safe house number 1 is endgame scoring for them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the top cube from our income track here. These cubes are only ever placed in businesses or safe houses. No other locations use them. Then we're going to take this cube and we're going to put it down here to note that green has visited the safe house. What this also notes is that the safe house is a endgame scoring. So the other players know that they've got endgame scoring, but they don't know how much. It could be anything. If it was income, we would put it up there and then immediately take income from the supply. When we take income, we take the top open value on this track. So we've gone down from 9 to 8 by putting out 1 cube. What our green player has done is put this down here. And this also has the important purpose of indicating that they have visited this location. You cannot visit a safe house that you have already visited. The next thing that happens after you visit a safe house is that your notoriety goes down by 1 because you're safe. So our green player would take a star and put it here onto the negative notoriety position. Then you may take one of the keys here if you want. So we'll take a black key, which we'll put onto our player board. Now this is notable that you can only have 3 keys total in the game, so make sure you choose wisely. The last thing you can do at the safe house is take a fixer tile. Now this is not a deck, so you can go through this set of fixer tiles here and pick any of the tiles that you want to take. But it should be noted that when you take a fixer tile, you immediately pay the cost in the top left corner. When you take the fixer tile, you must put it on your player board here in one of these open positions. And so after you've chosen your fixer tile, then your turn is at an end, and it's time for the next player. Because that's all you do at a safe house. So let's look at a business. Our green player has wound up here at the restaurant. Now the first step of winding up at a business is exactly the same as the safe house. You take the top cube of your income track here and put it down in the appropriate space on the business here. Now that could be in the bottom part if it's endgame scoring, and the top part if it's income. Now if you do put it in the income space, again you go to your board here and check what your income number is. So here we've got 7, and you immediately take that amount of money from the supply and put it into your secret stash so that nobody knows how much you've really got. Then the next thing you can do at a business is take a contact card. And this is actually mandatory. You must take a contact card. So you'll select one of the 7 cards here. And when you go to select a card from the contact board, you must do one of the following 3 things. The first thing is pick it up and put it into the leftmost space on your player board. That card is now something that you have access to and you can use. Obviously you can pick any of the 7. Unlike the fixer tile, you don't pay for it when you pick it up, you only pay for it when you use it. As you can see, every contact card has a monetary amount on it, as well as some have this symbol here. Others do not. So the cards are free to take and put on your board, but whenever you use the card for its ability, you must pay this amount here, and you will take any notoriety indicated here. You will then flip the card over to show that it's been used. This symbol on the back just shows that this is a card that forces you to take notoriety. It doesn't have any other purpose other than to indicate that there's also one on this side. We'll look at using contact cards a bit more when we get to the executive actions, but when you take a contact card because you've, say, visited a business, then you put it down in the leftmost spot. You always fill up from the leftmost spot on your player board. And any card you take is immediately replaced from the deck. If you do not want to take the card onto your board, you can return it to the box instead and just remove it from the game. You can always choose to do that, but you must always do it when you would take a contact card. You cannot elect to do nothing. The last thing is that if your board is full, you can still take a new contact card and replace one of the ones on your board. The one you replace goes back to the box, but if you do replace a card, you take a notoriety. So that's visiting a business. Just the 2 things: put out a cube, take income if that's what's happening, then get a contact card, which you must do. You should note, however, this symbol here on the business section of the board. Now, obviously this is indicating that this is the 1 to 3 player side of the board, but that also has relevance to this symbol. In a 1 to 3 player game, you can see we've got a business symbol here with 2 cubes beneath it. This means if at any point 2 player cubes are in the same business, then that business closes. When you close a business, you flip it over like this so that it's on its locked side. Yellow can still visit the restaurant if yellow wants, but in order to access the business, yellow now needs to unlock it. And in order to unlock it, they'll need to spend a key from their player board. They can take a key of any color, the color does not matter, and they'll flip it over to the discarded side. This is important because those keys also open up the lockers, which have lots of endgame points in them. So if you're using them to access these businesses, you've got to decide whether that's more important to you than accessing the lockers. And before we move on from businesses and safe houses, let's just take one more quick note of these 2 situations here. Once all 3 businesses are out on the board, if you manage to visit all 3 businesses, then you can have one of these 2 bonuses. This symbol here means take an extra action disc, and we'll discuss how these work in a bit. When you get an extra action disc, you just put it here into the extra action disc space on your player board. The other option is gain a asset tile and a negative notoriety. So more on unlocking asset tiles later on. Similarly, once all 3 safe houses are out on the board, you may visit all 3 safe houses. And if you do so, then you will either gain an extra action token, or you'll unlock an asset and immediately take income. Although if you've got all three of these cubes out, your income's probably pretty low at this point. Cool. Let's talk about gang hideouts. So gang hideouts are another location on the board that you can visit. So let's say our green player decides to go one here into the water, and then travel along the water and go one here into the gang hideout. So let's say our yellow player decides to move through the water here, which they can do because of the ferry, and here into the gang hideout. Now, when you enter a gang hideout, you must check a number of things. One, if there's another player there, you can't go in. Also, do you have $5,000? If you don't have $5,000, you can't go in. If you do have $5,000, you must spend it to hire the gang. First, you're going to have to take $5,000 and return it to the stash. Then what you're going to have to do is take these two gang guys and put them onto your... So we've got a gang space on the bottom of our player board here. And we'll take one of our two gang discs, put it down here to show that we're the green player who has hired this gang. We'll take these two gang meeples and put them on our player board here. Note that if the green player goes off to do something else, another player cannot enter this location because there is another player's symbol here. The gang are not very friendly to the other criminals, only to the person who's hired them. What you can do is spend these guys as an executive action. Remember, the executive actions are the bonus actions done outside the other three actions that we take. And you can spend them as executive actions to perform certain abilities. Well, they have 3 abilities each, which are actually indicated here by these 3 symbols on your player board. But we'll have a look at those in more detail in just a second. When you do spend one to take an executive action, you'll put them back here. And once you've spent both of them, and they've both returned to their appropriate gang hideout, you'll take your token back and put it back on your player board. It should be noted that you can only ever have 2 gangs hired at any given time. We'll have a look at the actual 3 actions that the gang can do when we get to executive actions in a minute. Let's continue looking at the locations that you can visit first. The next location we've got here is the exits. And the exits are pretty simple. Remember, there are 3 of them, and they've got 2 states, open and closed. So let's have a talk about that. An exit is open if it doesn't have 2 cards in its exit slot. So at the moment we've got exit 3 and exit 1 on the board. We can see that 3 has no cards and 1 has 1 card. That means both exits are open. We've got 3 more police cards to come out, which means that it's likely one of the exits will close next day, and by the 3rd day only 1 exit will be open at all. Let's go ahead and skip forward in time by revealing the day 2 patrol cards. So here we've got exit number 3 and exit number 1. So number 1 is now closed and definitely out of the game. When an exit is closed, take one of the 2 decks of exit tiles and pick either one, it doesn't matter, they're both the exact same, and put it down here. Next, check to see if that exit is on the board. In this case, we do have exit 1 on the board, so we'll move this stack of tiles over here onto exit 1. This serves as a helpful reminder that this exit is closed and also unlocks a new thing you can do when you visit this exit. When you visit an exit tile, you may take income and you must take a contact card. Remember, that's just going to give you the 3 options we looked at before. Return one to the box, put it on your player board, or replace one on your player board. And you will, I don't know why you wouldn't take income, so you might as well get some more money as well. When you visit an exit that's closed, then you can take income or an exit tile. In addition, you'll still take a contact card. When you take an exit tile, you count up the number of contact cards on your player board. Let's say in this example, green has 2 contact cards on their player board. They'll take the top 2 tiles of this deck, and they'll have a look and see what's going on. So this one is worth nothing, and this one's worth 50. We can check the distribution of the tiles in this deck on the back here. We can see there's 2 zeros, 2 50s, and 1 70. So we choose to keep the 50 and put it on our player board, and return the 0 to the tile stack. So we're not going to show anyone what's on this tile. We're going to keep it secret, and we're going to put it here into our inventory. And so that's exits and the exit locations. Now, remember, you'll wind up with both sets of tiles on the board at some point in the 2 closed locations. You could get one out at the very beginning of the first day if you draw the same 2 numbers on day 1, but it's unlikely. Before we finish talking about exits, let's just find out which is our open exit here. Our final card is a 2, which means that the 3 is the open exit. When you visit an open exit that is the official exit, on day 3, you can choose to exit the game. The first thing you're going to do is reference this chart. This chart has down the left-hand side here the number of players available in the game, and across the top the order in which they've exited the board. So in a 3-player game, the first player to exit the board pays nothing. The second player is going to have to pay 5,000, and the third player is going to have to pay 10,000. So there's going to be some pressure for you based on how much money you've got on your person about deciding when to exit the board. The last thing you want is to be caught out exiting last and being unable to afford it. If that's the case, you cannot exit the game and you cannot participate in final scoring. You have lost. Remember what I said earlier as well when I was explaining the avoid step. When you exit through the official exit and succeed in leaving the city, you count as leaving this tile, which means you must avoid any cops on that tile as well. There is a further catch, however. Now that yellow has left the board, in addition to green and pink now having to pay to leave, they will also have to pay 1,000 at the beginning of their turn to take an action at all. So if yellow leaves at the top of day 3, that means that pink will go next, and pink has to give up 1,000 from their personal supply back to the main supply, and if they cannot pay, then they're eliminated from the game. So now that we've talked about that, let's have a look at the hospital, the building on the starting tile. The hospital is a little different to other locations in the sense that when you visit it, you don't take a notoriety for each player there. It's the only building that works this way. When you visit it, no matter what, you take 1 notoriety. And that's because the doctors have to report all gunshot wounds. Then you can pay 1, 3, or 6,000 to heal 1, 2, or 3 wounds. So in this case, our green player has 2 wounds and pays 3,000 to heal them both and takes a notoriety. And that's all there is to the hospital. The next building on the list is the church. And the church is really very simple. When you visit the church, you can pay $1 to lose. You can pay $1,000 to lose a notoriety. You can unlock an asset tile, and you can take a contact card. Note that take a contact card is always mandatory, and unlocking an asset tile is always good, so you'll want to do that. And I'll explain unlocking asset tiles in just a minute. So the church just gives you sort of 3 nice things to do. It helps you lose notoriety, and unlock your board, and take a contact card. The clinic is much the same. So you'll heal a wound at the clinic, you'll unlock an asset tile, and take a contact card. So let's look at the store, because the store has got quite a lot going on. Here we are visiting the store. Remember, when you show up here, you'll take 1 notoriety for any players already there. Now the stores do have these letters here, but these are only used for the single and 2-player version of the game, so you don't need to worry about them in the 3-up player version. And when you visit the store, you can do 3 things. And this is our convenience store board here. And the first thing you can do is take a gasoline. You just put it here on your player board. So you can have a maximum of 2 gasolines at any given time. Gasoline is very simple. You give it up to get an extra point of movement in the travel step of your turn. The next thing you're going to do is buy up to 2 pieces of equipment. That's what this times 2 here is. You can buy 2 pieces of equipment out of the 4 there. And equipment is all the same. Equipment allows you to avoid cops. So the hat allows you to avoid a blue cop. The jacket allows you to avoid a red county cop. And the SWAT helmet allows you to avoid a SWAT. The gas mask is slightly better than the others, which is why it's slightly more expensive. And that allows you to avoid a county cop or a SWAT cop. Note that you have to buy 2 different pieces of equipment, so you can't buy 2 gas masks. The final thing you can do here at the convenience store is open one of these lockers. Now, the very first thing you're going to have to do in order to open a locker is to take one of the keys corresponding to the locker type you want to open and flip it to its used side on your player board. If you don't have a key corresponding to that color, you cannot open a locker of that type. If we were to open the black locker, we'd flip this to its used side. There is a further restriction, however. You see, the lockers require you to have a certain level of notoriety and help. This line of text along the bottom here indicates that you must have a sum total of 5 notoriety and contact cards. What that means is that you're going to check your notoriety level, which is your position here on this track. So you all start at 1. Then you're going to check the number of contact cards here on your player board. In this case, we've got 2. And we're going to see if it equals or betters this number. In this case, we need 5, and we've got a total of 3, so we cannot actually open the black locker. Once you've selected which locker you want to open, and you have the correct key and the correct sum of notoriety and contact cards, check this iconography at the bottom. Again, we're referring to contact cards here. You can tell from this symbol. The green has contacts +1, black is just straight up contacts, brown is contacts -1. This is the number of tiles you're going to draw. So if you have 2 contact cards, you get 2 tiles from the black deck, and then you can choose which one you want to keep. So you can see the distribution again on the back here, once you've decided which tile you're going to keep. When you return any remaining locker tiles to their appropriate deck, just give that deck a shuffle and return it to its appropriate spot. And put the one you're keeping on your player board. It must go into your inventory here, of course, where all of the tiles of this shape go. And if you cannot put it into an empty slot, you must replace something you've already got, which of course gives you a notoriety. And so that's everything for the convenience store. And so with that, we've covered all of the locations you can visit on the board. So now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about gaining notoriety. So the notoriety step. It's very simple. Everyone checks the placement of their stars on their player board and adjusts their notoriety accordingly. In this situation on green's board, they wouldn't adjust their notoriety at all because the stars here equal the stars there. In this case, their notoriety would go up by 1, and in this situation, their notoriety would go up by 2. Inversely, if this were the case, their notoriety would go down by 2. When you adjust your notoriety, you simply take your piece and move it up the number of steps accordingly. Now, there are a few important things to note. We've already discussed losing points at the end game. If you're ever at 6 notoriety and you gain any more notoriety, you will take a wound for every notoriety you would gain, which is very bad. But you'll also notice these 3 red lines, which are called thresholds. When you pass a threshold, it will have the consequences here on this side. So, the first consequence is that you alert the police, and we'll have a look at what alert the police means. That happens every time. Then, at the first threshold, you can unlock an asset tile. At the second threshold, you can unlock 2 more asset tiles, and at the third threshold, you'll get an extra action disc and unlock another asset. It is possible that you might on one turn go up 2 notoriety, on the next turn go down, on the turn after that go up 1 more, as we have a number of notoriety steps over the course of the day. If you cross the line, every time you cross it, you suffer the consequences, both bad and good. Let's look at alerting the cops. When the cops are alerted, everybody with a lower notoriety than you, and it should be noted that notoriety is adjusted in player order, so even if they're about to have equal to or higher notoriety than you, it doesn't really matter. The point is that currently they're below you. So, in this case, both yellow and pink will both get to take part. If yellow were up here, it would not. But anyone with lower notoriety than you can move a cop towards you. Now, there are 2 important restrictions when moving the cops. The first restriction is that you cannot have 2 cops of the same color on the same tile. So there'll only ever be a maximum of 3 cops per city tile. The second restriction is that you can never put cops on the main hospital tile, the starting tile. That one is always going to be cop free. But our green player is currently here in the convenience store. Yellow player picks first because they're next in turn order, and they can take a SWAT from any tile on the board and move it to this tile. It does not have to be adjacent. So they decide they're going to take this SWAT here and put them onto this tile. Now it's Pink's turn to move on, and Pink would really like to get rid of this blue cop. Unfortunately, there's already a blue cop on green's tile, and this would be an illegal movement because this tile is no closer to green than this one. So the police must move closer to green. Unfortunately, there's only 2 cops that Pink can actually legitimately move towards green. This red cop and this red cop. And the only tile those red cops can enter is the tile Pink is in. Pink must move the federal cop. The only time they could pass is if there were no legal moves. Once notoriety has been adjusted, everybody resets their notoriety meter on their board, and then the next action phase begins. After the final notoriety step of phase 5, we will move into the optional action phase. Starting with the first player in turn order, that player may select to use an extra action disc to do another turn. Players who do not have an extra action disc cannot participate, and so they are immediately skipped. If green chose not to play their extra action disc, then yellow would choose and pink would choose. If they had none, then we would move into the next notoriety step, and then the second optional action step, and the process would repeat. All 3 players could have 2 action discs and still actually skip this step if no one wants to spend them. You can participate in the dawn optional action step even if you did not participate in the night optional action step. So each player will have taken at this point between 3 and 5 actions, and we will do one last notoriety step, and then we are into the final phase of the day, which is the prepare day phase. And during the prepare day phase, only 2 things happen. One, this timer is reset to the top of this track, and the other is that if you used your rest token, it is flipped from its night side onto its day side. So if you have rested, your rest token will look like this, and during the prepare day phase step, you'll just flip it back over to its sunny side. And I'll explain the rest token in just a minute. And so now we've done the prepare a new day step, and we're back to the top of the day phase, get income. You'll note that during the get income step, which we skipped on day 1, we will take income equal to the highest position on this track, which in this case would be 8. And then we have the option, if our notoriety is 1 or 2, we can pay $3,000 to unlock an asset tile. $3,000 of cash on hand. Remember, you can only do this step if you're in rung 1 or 2 of the notoriety track. There's a little reminder up here to remind you that you can do that when you're on 1 or 2 notoriety. Spend 3 to unlock a tile. So what is unlocking asset tiles? So as we went through all the buildings available in the game, we saw how you could fill up your inventory and your contacts down here. But we've got these 6 asset tiles out here on our board blocking these spaces. Well, you guessed it, when you unlock an asset tile, then you take one of these 6 asset tiles and move it to this left-hand side of your player board here. So in this case, we've just paid $3,000. We can unlock an asset tile. We can pick any of the 6. So we must decide, do we want another contact space? Do we want another inventory space? Now, each of these asset tiles has a different unique ability on it. And these abilities can be used as executive actions, and they're one use only. You can see that we start with one that allows us to take an extra action disc. So we want to be thinking about which tiles we want to use, and also considering that these tiles actually have a cost. In order to activate them, you must pay the cost below them. As you unlock the tiles, you'll move them from this position to this position, and they'll get progressively cheaper the more tiles you put out. When you unlock a tile, you can select any of the 6. If you choose, for example, the master key, which can be used in lieu of a key on your keychain, any tiles to the left of the space will move up. So this means you're always unlocking the leftmost space, but you can choose any of the tiles. Similarly, all of these allow you to move around the cops. You might decide you want to move a SWAT, taking this one in the middle, which means that the county cop will move up. Using asset tiles is an executive action that can be taken at any time, and you pay the sum below immediately, and then you flip the tile, gaining the benefit straight away. And you get to have an endgame scoring bonus as well. Now, before I go on to explaining all the rest of the executive actions, which I'm going to do in just a minute, let's just have a quick look at this rest token here. So there are 6 executive actions in the game as well. So the 6 executive actions are use a fixer tile, use a contact card, or use a piece of equipment. There's also use your band-aid, use a gang member, and use an asset tile. The band-aid is an executive action that can be spent to heal a wound at any time. And you know it can heal a wound because it's got this iconography at the bottom here, moving the cube into the green space, which is the heal a wound thing. When you want to use an asset tile, you just pay the cost, flip the tile, and carry out the instructions on the tile. 2 things to note about using asset tiles. The first is that they can be used at any point on your turn. Of course, you can't use them on someone else's turn. And they're one use only. So once you've paid for them to be used, you do get this nice endgame bonus, but they're done. You cannot use them again in this game. So let's have a look at the fixer tiles, equipment tiles, and contact cards. So here we've got some examples of contact cards. And there's really just a few important things to note about these contact cards. The first important thing to note is this little symbol up here. Now you can see both of our cards here have the feet on them. This feet symbol indicates that they must be used in the travel step of your turn. So you activate them before you do the alert step and before you do the visit step. So you cannot activate the spy once you've visited a location. You must use her during the travel step. This symbol is the wound symbol or alert step symbol. and it refers to cards and elements that take place in the alert step, like wounds from cops. The contact cards that bear this symbol are only used for effects in the alert step of the action phase. And when you use a contact card, you must pay the cost down here, and you must take the notoriety if there is one. And then you flip it over, and you cannot use it again until it's flipped back over, either using another contact card or by resting. The equipment works much the same way, although you'll note that unlike the rally car, it doesn't move the cops, it just prevents taking a wound. So during the alert step, when you would take a wound, say from a SWAT or a county cop, instead you can just flip these tiles to ignore that wound. And these don't flip back over unless you have another card that specifically flips them back, or you rest. Finally, we've got fixer tiles, and the fixer tiles have different bonuses on them. This one, for example, lets you use a gang action, and we'll look at what the 3 gang actions are in just a minute. Now, remember, you paid for the fixer tile when you took it, so you don't have to pay for it again when you use it. There is a little 1x here, which means that all of these tiles are one use only. Once they're used, they're flipped over to this side, and they can never be used again. This one allows you to cross water as though there were a ferry there when there isn't one. This one unlocks an asset tile. This one lets you lose 1 notoriety. This one will immediately give you income. What's notable about the fixer tile is that when you use it, you flip it over like this, and it remains on your board in this state until you get rid of it. This is important because when you get rid of it, you do of course gain 1 notoriety for replacing a tile on your board. The tile that is replaced is put back in the game box. It's out of this game forever. So the last thing to look at are the gangers. They give you these 3 actions. Now, we already covered the helicopter action in the travel section of this video explanation, so if you need to refresh yourself on what the helicopter action does, they can also be spent to reduce 1 notoriety. And finally, they can be spent to ignore all of the cops on a tile when you're leaving it. In this case, Green is here in this gang, and he puts down his disc to hire these 2 gangers who go onto his board. He could then travel 1, 2, 3 back to the hospital. Upon leaving this tile, must avoid these 3 cops. He can spend 1 ganger returning it to its gang position to ignore these 3 cops. He could then immediately spend his 2nd ganger to reduce his notoriety by 1. Now that all the gangers have been returned to their hideout, he returns his disc to his board. Now that we've talked about the action phase and executive actions, before we wrap up, let's just talk about the rest action, which you take instead of doing anything else in the action phase. If you remember, when you take an action, you can travel, avoid, and then visit a location. What you can elect to do once per day, so up to a maximum of 3 times in the game, is instead of doing all of that, you can simply flip this over to rest. And when you rest, you reset all of your cards with this symbol on. Anything you've got flipped over on your player board with this symbol at the bottom here will be reset when you take this rest action. So we can flip over this piece of equipment. We can flip back over these contact cards as well, and they can now be used again. And remember, we can unlock an asset tile like we just looked at, and you reset your band-aid. And that is how rest works. The rest token is reset phase 6 of each day. So that's resting. You've pretty much got all the information you need, but I'll quickly talk about missions and variable player powers. So here we've got the player powers. Now there were a bunch that came in the sort of Kickstarter stuff, so I guess these are just extra bonus ones. I don't know why they're gray, but these ones are associated with the actual player colors that come in the box. The way it's going to work is that we can put out a number of powers equal to the number of players, and then we can choose them in player order at the beginning of the game. So you get these kind of cool sort of player powers that have a pro and a con, and on the back you get a story about who they are as well. And if you've got the Kickstarter stuff, you've got a bunch more of these as well, so that can give the game some real replayability. You've also got these mission cards here, and it's advised not to use the variable player powers with the mission cards because some of the combinations can break the balance of the game quite severely. And the mission cards work, you can just deal 1 to each player at the beginning of the game, and then what it's got at the top is a secret mission that you'll have to do, and you can complete one or the other. And then when you complete it, you can play the card face up and say, well, I have 1 locker tile and 1 exit tile, so I've completed this card, or I've received income from 2 businesses, and again, this can be checked on the player board. And so when you've completed your mission, you can just pick one of the abilities on the bottom and put down this little cube, and that's the ability you've chosen to have. This little token is used for tracking abilities that are limited to 1 use per day,
and you just flip it to the X side when you've used it to show that it's been used that day.
If you have any strategy tips or anything like that, also